All right, Nick the Tiro here, another forensics video. There is a tool that has been around for the Windows environment for many years. And years ago, when we used to teach like Windows 95 and 97, Windows NT, and stuff like that, we would introduce this tool. And I'm going to be really honest about this. You can do a lot of things with the Windows Registry Editor. Probably the biggest thing you're going to do with the Windows Registry Editor is ruin your machine. The registry is a hierarchical database of configuration information associated with your machine. So every configuration type event on your computer is maintained within the registry down to where icons are and where files are located and stuff like that. And it's somewhat of a very confusing environment. It is an extremely powerful tool. Some techniques you have to use the registry to do some configurations, but it's not strongly encouraged. And again, this goes back, I've been working with the Windows family of operating system almost 30 years. It's one of those things that I use it very sparingly in the configuration process of a Windows machine, and I only use it when it really has to be used and I'm giving detailed instructions on how to do it. It's just, it's a massive undertaking, and I always run the risk with the Windows registry to ruin my machine. If I do something wrong inside the Windows registry, I can render my machine basically useless. But we leave a digital trail everywhere we go. If we're using our phone, the phone's constantly being pinged, and all that stuff is being tracked internally. It's being tracked by the other entities, but we leave this digital footprint every place we go. If you're like me, I have a laptop and I do travel for work, I travel for pleasure, and if you're like me, I take it to home, it's constantly being used. And over the course of time, I've probably been on a few dozen different networks. And out of convenience for myself, for example, if I go to Lakeland, I don't have to constantly re-register the network. It just knows, hey, you've been here before. Now, as forensics investigators, truly think about that. These operating systems, whether it be my iPhone or my laptop, I've conditioned it, I've trained those devices to say, hey, if you've been someplace before, remember that. And the key word is remember that. And that is all tracked inside some configuration file somewhere, whether it be a Windows registry or the iPhone or a Mac or a Linux. That stuff is being maintained. Now, we're going to use the demonstration of Windows. Again, it's a demonstration, but there are tools available to discover the material. I've never personally used those tools, but I can discover the same material, whether I'm looking at the iPhone. I can use like an FTK imager, which we'll talk about in another video, or I can do a Mac. I'm just not familiar with those tools. So this is not so much a demonstration of the Windows registry, but it's more of a demonstration of this is the stuff that your computer is maintaining for you to help you. I'm going to go up to my screen. You've seen this before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the registry editor tool. So I'll go to search. And there it is. I don't have it as an icon. I don't have it as a shortcut on my desktop. I just don't use it that much. And I'm going to go to it. And lo and behold, here is the Windows registry. Now, I need to be real careful because this is my live machine. So I'm not going to make changes. I'm not going to make accidental changes or anything like that. Normally, what we would do, we've talked about imaging before. I would image the machine. If I couldn't image a machine, I could export the registry, right, and work on the export file. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be very cautious. I've done this before. Now, the next thing with the registry is it's hierarchical in nature. Things get buried down, and I cheat. Here's my book here. I keep notes of certain keys inside the registry. There's no way for me to remember this. So I either keep it in my notebook or I keep it in my little personal journal here. I'm constantly taking notes because I just can't remember, especially you're going to see me barreling down, going down the different structure. So I'm going to go to H key local machine. Then I'm going to go to software, and you see me reading the book. I'm going to go to Microsoft. I'm going to go to Windows NT. A lot of this stuff is holdover from years ago. I'm going to go to Windows NT, go to current version. Under current version, I'm going to go to network list. And underneath network list, I'm going to go to profiles, and I'm going to click on profiles. And if you look on this left-hand part, these are all the Wi-Fi networks I have been on over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. So when I go to work and I want it to remember me, there's the profile. If I go on a business trip or I go on a vacation or I visit a friend or I go to Starbucks, these are all the networks that I have been on. So let me paint a picture for you. You're investigating a computer. The individual says, I have never been to Starbucks. I don't use the network at Starbucks, or I've never been to this particular location. I've never been to a friend's house or an acquaintance or somebody who says they knows me. I've never used the particular network. Now, there's no guarantee that it's going to be here, right? Maybe they didn't say remember, or they say forget this network. Most operating systems can say forget the network, and what that would do is peel that off. But this is a pretty hefty sum. This video is not about the registry, but things we can find within the registry. So let's take a look at this very first one. It's kind of cryptic there, but we can begin to start looking at things. Oh, I've been on a network called AT&T G SUV HFI. Well, I don't know exactly where that could be located, but there at some point in time, and this is going to be critical here, some point in time, I was on that network. Now, here's where life gets a little interesting or boring or, geez, that's a lot of work. There is a date and time stamp there. If you look right here, it says date created. That's when this entry was created, or when the first time this computer was on the network, on that particular network. Date last connected. What do you think that was? The last time that it was used. Now, it's a little cumbersome. Forget it. I should look it up what it's called. I think it's called the Little Endian, Endin, the Little Endian. There's two ways that data can be stored. One is Big Endian. The other is Little Endian. Years ago, we politically incorrect, 40 years ago, we called it Indian, but it's pronounced Endian, Endian. And that just says how things are stored. And with Little Endian, they say the most significant bit is the farthest away, or it's the lowest bit value or something like that. Don't worry about it. If you want to look it up, go ahead and look it up. But what this is telling me here is, first, these two values here, E4, E7, and E6, E7. Those are the year that this was accessed. So I'm going to go to my little calculator. And I'm going to fire it up. I'm going to make sure it's in the programmer mode where I can convert hexadecimal and binary. I'm going to go to the hex value. And because this value over here is using the Little Endian, it's actually read 07E4, not E4, E7, but 7, but it's E7, I'm sorry, 07E4. So I'm going to put that as a hexadecimal value of 07, it's not going to show the 0, E4. And if you look over here, the decimal conversion of that is 2020. That's the year that I made first connection to this particular network. The next value over is the month. And let me clear this. And if I just say B, that's the 11th month. So November 2020. And guess what this is over here? This is the date, 06. It is hexadecimal, but this was created on November 6, 2020. They're storing the year as these 4 bytes, and they're storing the month, and then they're storing over here. So on November 6, 2020, it was the first time I was on this network. This was the last time I was on the network, and I shouldn't have gotten rid of the calculator. And it's going to be, let me clear this again, 07 E6. So the last time I was on that network was 2022, April, and I would guess it doesn't really have a time here, maybe midnight or something. There's a lot more values in here. I just remember the first few here, but April, we'll say April 3rd or something. I just don't remember off the top of my head. But you can see that it's somewhat undeniable that this particular computer, it may not have been me personally, but this particular computer was on that network. Now, what other networks have I been on? Weston, that was a hotel. Lakeland employee. Another Lakeland employee again. JW Marriott. That was a hotel that I stayed at when my wife and I and my son were traveling. It happened to be in Hong Kong. If you look here, we can say E7, that would be 2023 when we were there last time. And away we go, right? Bunch of different hotels over the course of time. I think I've had this computer like 4 or 5 years. I've never cleared things out. Now, some people will ask, are passwords stored inside the registry? No and yes, all right? No, they're not stored where you would see them in plain text. No, you would not see them even in encrypted form. What you may see them is, because remember, these networks are trying to make it convenient for you, so you're not always logging in. They would be stored as some kind of hash value with seeded hash value. So even if you were able to find where those values were located, they would not show up, right? You would not be able to see it. Now, let's pause here for a second. I had to look up some particular information. Let's use another possible situation with the registry. Every time you pop in a new USB device, whether it be a flash drive, a mouse, or something like that, you will often notice it goes through a process of finding the drivers, downloading the drivers, what we call plug and play, and allowing that device to be used, right? But then subsequently, whenever you plug in that device, you don't see that anymore, because the registry is maintaining a list of those USB devices and their their drivers. Well, think about all the devices we are now connecting to our computers with the USB. So I take a flash drive, right? A thumb drive, whatever you want to call it, USB drive, and I put it in my machine. It finds the drivers and it runs. The next time I do it, it's just fine. Well, guess what? The registry does monitor that, again, to make our lives simple, so we don't have to constantly download those drivers. It's not a log file. It's how the registry works. So in that little bit of a break there, in that little cut there, I had to go look up the registry for the USB drive. So let me bring it over. I could have done it on the fly. But here, viewing USB connection history, right? Open the registry editor, blah, 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 blah. Go to this particular key. The USB drive will be listed in the sidebar. Okay, so let me get off here. Let me go back to my registry editor. You can see how huge it is. And it says H key local machine. Okay, we've been there. System. Been there. Current control set. Current control set, we're there. Enum. Under enum, we have USB store. And there are my USB devices. So if I look at them, if I pull up any particular device, it tells me what that particular device is. I'm just kind of picking ones at random. This particular device is a disk. Here's the friendly name, Kangaroo SS3 USB device. Not quite sure what that is. What is this? This is some kind of safeguard USB. I'm sorry, it looks like it's a property, like a hard drive. Device is not let me get there. I'm kind of doing this on the fly. It's a super floppy. I have to assume that's my. I'm going to take a big assumption here. I'm going to assume that is my portable hard drive. But if I was to deep dive into this again, remember, we're suspending reality here a little bit. This would be a long, arduous process because let's say an individual says, that's not my USB drive. I've never plugged that into my computer ever. We now can investigate the USB drive, but more importantly, we can investigate the computer and say, oh, no. We found a USB drive that matches the USB drive that you're talking about. So at some point, that USB drive was connected to this particular computer. So registry editor, its primary purpose is really to manipulate the configuration files in Windows. But like I said, it's a very dangerous program and you run the risk of breaking things. But it can be used, and it is often used in investigations because it is keeping track. It's not a log file, but it's keeping track of the configurations and the things you've changed, right? So we saw what networks this computer has been on. I could always say, well, somebody else is using the computer. And now we've taken another step where we've seen what USB devices have been connected to this particular computer. A lot going on in the background of these computers, and that's fine. We just, as forensics investigators, this was a intro to one of the tools. There's a lot more for us to discover. That being said, let's go out and learn something.